F1's rulemakers have signed off on late changes to the 2026 regulations to try to resolve some lingering concerns about the new era. This relates to some specifics about how races will be run with the brand new cars, but there's also been a push behind the scenes to try to avoid confusion over how key elements of the new rules are presented to fans. It's all a result of the imperfect compromise that the 2026 cars represent, with a big increase in electrical power, significant change in what the new machines are like on the straights and through the corners, and some potentially convoluted solutions to sort the racing out around that. F1's new chapter is fast approaching, and shortly after the 2025 season ended, a raft of regulations were published for 2026. Some were brand new and partly covered a reorganisation of the existing rulebook, but there were also various clarifications to what's already been in the regs for months. It's fairly normal for F1's rules to be tweaked along the way, so there's no grand crisis here ahead of 2026, but some significant revisions coming in December, just a few weeks before brand new cars and brand new rules are rolled out, isn't exactly ideal. Especially as a big part of it is around resolving a long-running headache to do with the new active aerodynamics. A key part of the 2026 rules is the cars having movable aero on the front and rear wings. This replaces the drag reduction system we've known since 2011, except instead of the rear wing being opened on a chasing car to be used as an overtaking aid, the active aero will work exactly the same on all cars at more points around the lap. On the straights, to reduce drag, the top flaps of the front wing will back off and the rear wing will open a la DRS. For the corners, they will return to the normal position to produce more downforce. It's partly to combat a drop-off in straight line speed when energy deployment tapers out on the straights with the new engines, but also it requires less energy to fight drag on the straights, and a higher top speed helps recover more energy when braking. Overall, with the cars F1 will have to make the new engines workable, it's fairly logical. But as is always the way with new ideas, the active aero has come with some unintended consequences. The rules had opened the door for the wings to be in maximum downforce mode on the straights in certain conditions, like when the safety car is out or if it rains. As teams advanced their simulations, some problems were raised. Reduced downforce on the front and rear would obviously reduce the available grip and potentially present a real problem in the wet. With the way teams are optimising their wings, they want to shed as much drag as possible, which effectively means aiming for next to no downforce on the straights at all. A combination of a low grip damp track and any high speed kinks on the straights, as are experienced at tracks like Melbourne for example, also risk cars understeering helplessly off the track and crashing out. In addition, the reduced load is so significant when the wings are in low drag mode that the tyres can cool a lot. In Baku for example, Pirelli says the tyre temperatures currently drop around 35 degrees on the main straight, and with active aero on the front wings in 2026, this would only become more severe. At reduced speed behind the safety car, tyre temperatures would plummet and minimal downforce would make weaving needlessly risky. So making everyone run maximum downforce just to be safe seemed logical. Except running with increased drag has implications for energy deployment and fuel use, and much more importantly exerts enough force to push the cars into the ground a lot more. This would risk wearing the car's plank away, particularly at the front, and potentially lead to disqualifications like McLaren had with both its cars in Las Vegas and Ferrari had in China in 2025. Now we know the solution, which gives race control freedom to ensure that the active aero works in a way to avoid both technical and safety problems. As part of the December rules update, there's going to be a new partial active aero mode that puts the wings at different settings. This will feature the front wing elements being in low downforce mode and the rear wing flaps being in high downforce mode. If race control deems that conditions are too dangerous to not have full downforce, then it can disable full activation for any period. Should conditions improve, then the race director will have the ability to allow the next step to be the partial activation. This will be done in conjunction with the implementation of different length activation zones for different conditions. Ahead of each race weekend, the FIA will lay out the areas of the track where drivers can activate their movable wings. There will be an activation zone area for when full activation of the aero modes is allowed, and a shorter one when only partial activation is allowed. As an example, the FIA could allow partial activation to be enabled after any kinks to avoid any trouble in going through there in low grip conditions, while also ensuring that the downforce levels the cars experience are not extreme at the end of any subsequent straight.
Today's video is brought to you by Rovo, your AI teammate from Atlassian. Rovo connects knowledge, people and workflows so teams can work smarter and move faster. It helps people find answers, make decisions and automate work securely and with context through search, chat, agents and studio. Rovo runs on the Teamwork Graph, Atlassian's intelligent layer that unifies data across all of your first and third-party apps so no knowledge gets left behind, and so you always get personalised AI insights from day one. And the best news? It's already built into Jira, Confluence and Jira Service Management paid subscriptions, so the power of Rovo is already at your fingertips. Know the feeling when AI turns from tool to teammate. If you Rovo, you know. Discover Rovo, AI that knows your business, powered by Atlassian. Get started at ROV, as in victory, o.com today.
You might have noticed we've tried very hard to keep referring to active aero in this video and not use other terms you may have heard before, like X or Z mode or cornering mode and straight line mode. That's because F1 is renaming some of the complicated elements of the 2026 rules in a bid to simplify things and make it clearer for fans. New rules aren't just about what appears in massive regulation dumps. How things are presented to the public is crucial, especially as F1 can be so jargon heavy and loves a crap acronym. F1 and the FIA have been consulting with fans, teams and broadcasters to finalise the names for some of the core elements in a bid to create something that's unified. They want to make it simple to understand what's happening and have a unified terminology used by the teams when they speak to the drivers on the radio, but also by the commentators on TV, and also have the same terminology in the regulations. So it's no surprise some of the new concepts that are arriving for 2026 are to be rebranded, and not for the first time. F1 had already moved away from the original plan to name its active aero system as X mode and Z mode, but the subsequent switch to straight line mode and cornering mode is also going to be dropped, and active aero is all that will be used instead. With all the cars effectively running in the same wing modes either in corners or on the straights, it always seemed pretty pointless officially labelling the different aero configurations. But as the wings will move, and this is the most visible thing that anyone watching F1 in 2026 will see, it makes sense to have something to explain what that is. This also applies to things that will be a little less visually obvious. One of the defining characteristics of F1 2026 will be the greater reliance on electrical power, with the engine shifting to closer to 50-50 between the internal combustion engine and the electrical system. We understand that there are some preferred options that have gathered support around the terminology related to the engines and the power deployment, and the internet-derided manual override mode, or MOM, won't even make it to the start of 2026. This relates to the name being given for what is effectively replacing DRS as the means of helping drivers overtake on the straights. It gives a temporary energy boost that allows the driver close enough to the car ahead to be able to deploy the full quota of 350 kilowatts of electrical power for longer. Manual override mode was deemed too confusing and a bit silly, and this is expected to be labelled more simply as overtake. And it will be different to what should be referred to as boost, which is when drivers are deploying their normal battery energy on the straights to attack and defend. Another small change is that you will probably not hear drivers or teams or commentators refer to harvesting or regen when drivers are recharging their batteries. Instead, recharge is being encouraged. Some might see this as unnecessary dumbing down, others as a worthwhile cleanup of F1's sometimes unwelcoming vocabulary. What it definitely is a reflection of a more complex car rule set and how much of a bigger role the use of electrical power and movable aerodynamics will play in 2026 and beyond.